Do you want to maximize your success with NCUA? Join Mark Treichel as he shares with you the insider's view on passing your exam with flying colors. The With Flying Colors podcast is sponsored by Credit Union Exam Solutions by Mark Treichel. If you would like to work directly with the Credit Union Exam Solutions team and receive support to optimize your results with NCUA so you save time and money, visit us at marktreichel.com to find out more.
Hey everyone, this is Mark Treichel with another episode of With Flying Colors. I've got a special guest here today that I'm excited to chat with. Today, I am chatting with Chris Call, the CEO of North Bay Credit Union in California. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm great, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's afternoon out here. You still got a little bit of morning out there. And you and I have chatted online a little bit. I discovered you on LinkedIn. I know you're very passionate about your credit union. You're very passionate about marijuana banking. And there was some recent news that kind of triggered us to say, hey, maybe it'd be a good time to get on and talk about this for my podcast. So I appreciate that. But before we get into that, for my listeners, if you could give anything about your background relative to the credit union and what it is you're doing in this important area, go for it.
Sure. North Bay Credit Union has been banking cannabis operators now for the past 6 years. We got into it when California legalized recreational cannabis in 2017. And over the course of the next 6 years, we've grown our portfolio rather substantially and actually expanded beyond California borders to nationwide services to any state where cannabis is state legal. We're very involved in the industry. We work with all different kinds of operators, from cultivators to dispensaries to manufacturers to ancillary accounts of all kinds. So we're excited to see these developments coming through on the regulatory side, and we hope that's going to bode well for the industry.
Very good. Very good. And so back when I was still at NCUA, I had a 10,000 foot level. There was the Cole memo. I just always remember the Cole memo allows this, the Cole memo doesn't allow that. And there were always, whenever I was part of meetings where there might have been discussions about this from the examining side of things, there was this Cole memo. And pivot to today, and again, the recent news is the DEA made some announcements about some things that are happening. Could you speak a little bit to, maybe before we get into the most recent announcement, that journey you've been on? So 2017, like you said, 6-7 years, when you did it, being the pioneer of doing something is not always easy. And then in that journey, you learn things, the state learns things, NCUA learns things. How much easier is it to do today than it was in 2017, 2018, 2019, based on where we're at today?
I would say that I don't know that it's gotten easier, but we've certainly learned a lot in the course of the last 6 years. And as you probably know, Mark, we're technically still violating federal law by banking the industry. The issue that I've always had with the proposals for Safe Banking Act is that there's no current threat of federal prosecution anyway. And so I don't know why there needs to be a separate piece of legislation that specifically prohibits that prosecution. The banking for cannabis has grown tremendously in the course of the last 6 years that we've been involved with it. There's a lot more today than there certainly was when we started. We were one of the handful in the entire nation at that time that were willing to take on cannabis accounts. And it was very difficult initially. Nobody on our team had any experience with cannabis. We didn't really fully understand what the BSA requirements were and the FinCEN filings. So we had to learn all that. It was a tremendous learning curve. And over the course of several years, we built out a team of people that became really experts in anti-money laundering detection and BSA requirements and all the cannabis licensing issues that are involved, and how to properly vet transactions that are coming through the financial system. So like I say, other institutions have slowly begun to join that bandwagon, and we're seeing a lot of competition throughout the country nowadays. I would say banking for cannabis operators is widely available currently, even without the Safe Banking Act. And I think that's says a lot to just the interest in the industry by financial institutions and the expectations that the industry is going to eventually become fully legal.
And as you're talking through that, are there associations for financial institutions that want to do this, or user groups or those kind of things where you share, or is everybody on an island trying to learn this and wanting to learn it for their own institution? How does that work on this topic?
Yeah, when there were just a handful of us initially several years ago, we all collaborated and shared information, but it became evident after too long that we were all competing against each other.
Sure.
And nobody wanted to share proprietary information. And so that kind of fell apart. But, nowadays we still work with a lot of other institutions particularly on lending situations, because we've now started lending to cannabis operators. And a lot of the financing deals that we're looking at exceed our own internal lending limits. And so we need to seek partners who are willing to share that risk with us.
That's interesting. So the lending side, when you first sat down and said, okay, we want to do loans for these types of businesses, the marijuana businesses, and obviously, what should the policies be? What should the procedures be? How does that work with the laws, the rules, and all that? That must have been, how long ago were you able to start doing that? And what have you learned from that process that you could share?
We really only started doing cannabis lending about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And that was after several years of the banking side where we were taking in deposits. So we felt at that time we fully understood all the licensing issues and all the operator needs and requirements that we had to deal with just from a banking side. But there's a tremendous need for financing and investment in the cannabis space. And we felt like there was an opportunity for us to help out and provide some financing and also create some return on investment for our own members in that process. I think what we've learned in that, Mark, is that a lot of cannabis operators are not quite prepared for debt financing, because as traditional lenders are always going to want to look at financial statements. They're going to want to look at sources of repayment and collateral and those kinds of things. And a lot of cannabis companies have been structured specifically to avoid the tax issues involved with cannabis. And as a result, they've pushed a lot of their collateral and a lot of their earnings into ancillary entities, which are not eligible for the financing that they're looking for.
Okay.
So now that they're wanting debt financing, they've had to go back and rethink how they're structured and be able to produce traditional financial statements and corporate documents that we look for in any commercial lending situation.
Sure. That's, I guess, part of the maturation of the industry as they go through that march of being allowed to get banking. And then if you want to do that other side of the operation, get the loans, you're going to need to be able to show how you can pay for those loans. And so it's this evolution to me is fascinating, that it's getting easier for them to get service so that you can serve your entire membership. But with each it goes back to what you said, is it getting easier? No, it's just developing, right? There's always a new challenge as you take every step along that journey. So the Safe Banking Act and the DEA announcement that has come out that triggered us to get on to chat. If you could, for someone who's not familiar with, say, the Safe Banking Act, could you give a 10,000-foot level of what that is, where that's at?
Yeah.
In the process. And then after that, maybe we can talk about the specific DEA issue.
Yeah. So the Safe Banking Act has been introduced in Congress, I think 6 or 7 times now. And it gets through the House. It's been approved by the House a couple of times, but then it gets into the Senate and it gets blocked. And even if it were to pass the Senate, it would still have to be signed by the president. So they've tried numerous ways of getting that passed by attaching it to other bills. And it's always been a difficult challenge because it's been related to the federal status of marijuana, which is, of course, illegal. And it also impacts how cannabis is viewed in international treaties and things of that nature. So there's really a lot of issues involved in full deschedulization of cannabis. So all the Safe Banking Act does is ensure that any financial institution banking cannabis, that is accepting cannabis deposits, will be immune from federal prosecution of anti-money laundering laws. And as I said earlier, that has never happened anyway. There has never been a financial institution that has been prosecuted for taking cannabis funds. So it's a political paper tiger, if you will. It's nice to wave around in front of your constituents to say you're working on behalf of the cannabis industry, but it really doesn't do much to change anything about banking cannabis. It doesn't change all of the compliance issues related to banking. It doesn't change the cost involved with cannabis banking, which is oftentimes substantial. I think it would just give some of the larger financial institutions perhaps more assurance or comfort that they can represent to their shareholders that they've now fallen under the federal protection umbrella.
Got it.
And for those of us institutions that have been out on that limb for many years anyway,
Sure.
we're looking at those larger institutions thinking that they're Johnny-come-latelys and haven't been willing to put their own neck on the line like we have to help the industry out. And now they want to jump into the fray to make a quick buck.
No, I get that. That's interesting. So the deschedulization, hopefully I said that right, deschedulization of marijuana, that's linked to this recent DEA announcement. I'm presuming that they're looking at that, or let's venture into those waters. DEA doing, and how does that impact all of this?
So what's been happening in just the last couple of weeks, Mark, is that the Justice Department has proposed rescheduling. Rescheduling is different than descheduling. Cannabis has been a Schedule I drug, which is in the same category as heroin and cocaine and other hard drugs with no medical benefit. And there's a proposal to reschedule it to a Schedule III drug, which falls more into the area of drugs like codeine or ketamine that have some sort of medical benefit and are available through prescription. So that's a huge step forward towards ultimate deschedulization and full legalization. I wouldn't say that it's going to happen anytime soon, but just making it a Schedule III drug will open up all kinds of opportunities and pave the way for further acceptance of cannabis as a adult use product with a lot of medical benefits.
No, fascinating. You're right. It's like NCUA. If the NCUA board, their process would be a notice of an ANPR. They can say, hey, we're thinking about doing this regulation, right? Give us your comments. The next step up from that is a proposed rule, and there's a final rule. Now, there were rules that were proposed by NCUA that never were finalized. But if you don't start that first step of the ANPR to say, hey, let's talk about it, you're never going to get to the regulation because you can't just jump to the regulation. So,
yeah. And so the actual change, Mark, is not going to happen for many months because there's got to be public hearing, public comment. It's got to be approved by several agencies. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And ultimately, when it does happen, there'll be some rather immediate benefits for the cannabis operators in the form of they'll no longer be burdened by the tax issue of 280E, which is a requirement or, I guess, a restriction that a cannabis operator, anybody dealing in a federal illegal product, cannot deduct operating expenses from their tax return. So that goes away, and that makes immediately a lot of operators profitable that may have been struggling. And I think one of the biggest impacts of that will be also to encourage operators in the illicit market to become legitimate. The thing that has prevented a lot of operators from becoming licensed and regulated is having to pay taxes. And so if that situation goes away, then they might see the benefits of getting their license, getting regulated, and coming into the sunshine of the legalized world.
Okay. Yes. Yes. So when I hear the taxation issue, it's the whole, I think of the cash society and not necessarily paying your fair share, but this goes beyond that. This is if, and correct me, this might be a little rough justice, but if it's not legal to do this under federal law, it's not legal to deduct the expenses for doing it.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
That's logical, but that's a huge burden that I could see how that can cause so many issues for these organizations.
The other real benefit, Mark, besides the 280E issue, is I think having it as Schedule 3 drug opens up a lot of research opportunities. And one of the things that's really prevented cannabis from being as more widely accepted is the lack of critical research to show that it does have medical benefits. And as a Schedule 3 drug, there's a lot more research opportunity that will hopefully prove and document the medical benefits. And that, again, paves the way for further deschedulization. So it's going to attract additional investment. I think as investors look at the situation now with more research becoming available to cannabis industry and the profitability of the industry is going to go up with the tax situation. It's going to attract investment dollars, and the whole industry is it's going to be the ship on the rising tide, so to speak.
Yeah. Fascinating. I had pulled up a Bloomberg article trying to remind myself of some of the issues here. And there's a quote from President Biden. It says, "Far too many lives have been upended because of a failed approach to marijuana, and I'm committed to righting those wrongs." Sounds like if it can get through the journey, and if Biden wins a second term, that there may ultimately be relief.
Yeah.
At some soon juncture.
Yeah, it is encouraging, but I want to temper anybody's expectation that that's going to happen soon. I think there's going to be some opposition. I think you'll find that the public comment period on this reschedule proposal, all of the opposing parties will come out of the woodwork and do their best to try to prevent this from happening.
So, thinking out loud, the opposing parties, in your mind, who might the distillers not want it done because it's competition for alcohol, or is it what religious groups?
It's more the religious people, the reefer madness crowd who believe that cannabis is a gateway drug to bigger problems and that kind of perception.
That's got it.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to mention, Mark, and make sure your audience is fully aware that any reschedulization that happens with cannabis is not going to affect the status of cannabis banking. I think there's going to still be the same requirements, the same rigorous due diligence that's required. And people are expecting the cost of cannabis accounts to come down as a result of this. I think they're going to be disappointed because really nothing changes between the conflict between the state legalization and the federal illegal status of cannabis. That's still a bridge that has to be crossed, and there's still a number of money laundering issues that all the boxes have to be checked for any activity in a cannabis related account. So until cannabis is fully legal, banking is going to be still a pretty difficult task for any bank or credit union wanting to do this.
So rescheduling it versus fully legal. If we get out 2 years and everything tied to this, it's rescheduled, and it research can be done on it, and it's reclassified. It still doesn't tackle that. It's not legal via the federal.
Right.
What, I guess, as a former regulator, it's almost as if this step needs to happen before that next step. Is that a logical statement, or is there any reason there couldn't be a bill that also just makes it legal at this stage? In your mind?
There could be, but I think there has to be baby steps. And I think this is certainly the highest hurdle to be crossed, and any successive hurdles will be increasingly lower to get over.
That makes sense. Okay. Very good. I learned a lot today. I think the listeners, this is a really kind of good summary of where we've been, where we're at, where we might be going short term and long term. Is there anything, Chris, that I should have asked you related to this business, what you're doing with it, and how this could impact credit unions who are trying to serve their members best?
I just want to make another comment about the impact of this reschedule situation. I think there's been some talk or buzz I've seen online about the potential for credit cards to be accepted now for cannabis purchases. And that is not going to be the case until the credit card brands, specifically Visa and MasterCard, change their policies related to cannabis transactions. And I don't think that's going to happen until cannabis is fully legalized. So for anybody who's expecting the credit card situation to change in cannabis industry, I would say that's not going to happen for a while.
That makes sense. Till it's fully legal, they're not gonna go out on that limb, if you will. So that's a very good clarification.
And same with interstate commerce. I think there was some hope that cannabis operators would be to market their products across state lines because of Schedule 3 status. And I don't think that's going to be the case either. I think every state is going to restrict their own activities regardless of the federal scheduling status. Okay. So we're still a ways away, I would say, from really a normalized economy for the cannabis industry. But it's a big step forward to get to the point where it's now no longer a Schedule 1 drug. So that's all I had. I really appreciate your taking my input and my time. It's been a great talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you. This has been educational for me. And you made some very excellent points saying, hey, this is what it is. This is what it isn't. And it's a long road, but it's progress. And I think it's pioneers like you that are out there making people realize that this is needed, that is helping make progress. So thank you for what you're doing for your members and what you're doing for this whole important arena of banking.
You bet. Thank you.
Got it. And listeners, I want to thank you for listening. As always, I hope you'll listen again soon. This is Mark Treichel signing off with Flying Colors.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of With Flying Colors. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app to hear future episodes where subject matter experts of all varieties will provide tips on how to achieve success with NCUA. If you would like to learn more about how we assist credit unions, check out our services at marktreichel.com.